Hello, everybody. Welcome into a Thanksgiving edition of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Hopefully, the course of the next few minutes, we can provide some picks. It'll be stuffing your wallet with plenty of cash and no turkeys, hopefully, to use some really bad puns, metaphors, whatever you want to call them, as we get ready to roll into rivalry week of the college football season here. And with that in mind, it's always great to welcome in Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews. Of course, they are your experts for air, heating, plumbing, and electric needs this time of year. A lot of furnaces. People want to make sure they've got that safe heating system to make its way through the winter to come. So R.S. Andrews can certainly provide that for you. You can check them out online at rsandrews.com. Get that $99 mega furnace safety check. They're clean, screened, trained, and timely techs will show up at your house and take really good care of you. Make sure that heating system, that furnace, is ready to go for the cold weather season to come. And with that in mind, we'll say hello to Dari and bring him in on the program right now. Dari, happy Thanksgiving to you. Hope you're getting ready to enjoy yourself and getting ready to have a good time here over the course of the next couple of days.
Yeah, thanks. Happy Thanksgiving to you and the Dog Nation team and all the fans. Definitely looking forward to this weekend. Lots of football.
We should point out here that we are pre-recording this ahead of our typical Friday air date. That means a couple games we won't be able to talk about. Egg Bowl, although it sounds like based on some of the pre-week chatter, a lot of the folks here like Ole Miss. We're not going to do Missouri, Arkansas. We're going to do a lot of other big games, including Georgia versus Georgia Tech. In fact, we'll start there in just a moment. Before that, though, if this is your first time kind of checking in with us, let me kind of remind you how things go here on Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We hear from an entire collection of experts, and I use that in air quotes. Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, myself, Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers weigh in there as well. They pick games against the spread. Then Dari Payro decides if he wants to go with the flow and join the consensus on who's going to win and cover these games. And, of course, we invite everyone who's watching to kind of play along there as well and give your own thoughts about the picks that you have for the upcoming weekend's worth of games. As far as last week, Dari, who's been hot for most of the season, was very hot again. A 6-1 week for Dari Payro to pull himself into a flat-footed tie with our buddy Connor Riley right now. Connor goes 3-4 for the week. Dari goes 6-1. That puts both of them now at 62, 48-1 for the year. So 62, 48-1 for the year for both those guys. BA, that's me, another winning week, but still some ground to make up now at 51, 59-1 for the year. So winning weeks on the regular for me, but unfortunately still under 500 for the season. Dari and Connor in quite a battle here as we head towards the end. And I guess at some point in time we have to decide, we'll obviously do championship week next week. We have to do at least a couple bowl weeks there as well. And I don't know if we're going to do these on the basis of confidence picks, which is what a lot of people do, or we're just going to pick the games against the spread. But we got to make sure we do some bowl shows here too, I would think. I mean, Connor, don't we have to do some bowl shows?
I'm historically terrible at picking bowl games, so as someone who's trying to win, I'd rather not.
How about you, Dari? How you feel about doing a couple bowl shows? I feel like just to give the sponsorship its full value, we got to do at least one or two bowl shows, I feel like.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of good bowl games. I think we should definitely weigh in on them, look at them, and as well as I think it should come down to picking the Final Four. College playoff game.
That's a good idea there as well. So pretty fun stuff. We got a lot of games to pick here this week. Let's dive kind of right into it. Let's start with Georgia at Georgia Tech. Dogs opened the week as a 29.5 point favorite. Now down to about 28, depending on where you look at this. Georgia hasn't lost straight up at Georgia Tech since 1999, back in what has been a very friendly set of confines for them at Bobby Dodd Stadium. 28-point favorite here right now. How is this game going to go? Mike Griffith, I'll let you start us off here.
You know, early on I thought this game was going to be a lot closer than a lot of people thought. But after talking with the Georgia players and hearing how upbeat they are, the momentum that they have, I'm going to take Georgia to win this game and cover the spread. I got Georgia 41, Georgia Tech 10. That would cover a 28-point spread in Atlanta.
So Mike Griffith on the side of the favorite there, the Georgia Bulldogs on the road. Jeff Sintel, what do you think?
Point underdog. Some folks are going to wonder if Georgia can get to 28 points in any single game. For some reason, I think Coley and the Air Corps bombs it out a little bit this week against the Yellow Jackets. I think Georgia covers that 28 points. Might only be 31-3 or something like that, 35-3.
So 2 in a row on the side of the Dogs thus far. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, my guess is they're showing a lot of confidence here today as well. Let's find out. 78%, maybe a little lower than I would have thought. Taking Georgia as the 28-point, 4-touchdown favorite against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Connor, it's clean, old-fashioned hate. You've seen a lot of these over the years. How do you expect this one to go?
I am expecting a Georgia win here. And I actually do think they cover because if you will allow us to go down memory lane, they were a road favorite against Auburn.
Yeah.
Covered in that game. A road favorite in a neutral site game against Florida. Covered in that game. Road favorite against Tennessee. Covered in that game.
Good point.
Road favorite against Vanderbilt. Covered in that game. This team wins on the road, and they cover on the road. I don't expect that to change against the worst Power 5 team Georgia has faced to this point in the year. Give me Georgia in the 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think those are good numbers. I'm going to join you there as well, taking Georgia minus the 28. I mentioned before, Dogs haven't lost in Atlanta since the controversial 1999 game. They've actually also covered 10 straight at Bobby Dodd Stadium there as well. They're 6-2 in their last 8 against the spread against Georgia Tech. Now, obviously, the 2 are straight up on the field losses in 2014 and 2016. But beyond that, when Georgia has beaten Tech, for the most part, they've covered. The point spread hasn't really been a factor whatsoever. Connor mentioned the worst Power 5 team that Georgia's played thus far this season. I also think it's interesting, and I mentioned some of this on Dog Nation Daily this week, when you look at the numbers for what Georgia has done offensively against the bad teams that it's played, especially the running game, which Georgia wants to get going. Last couple times against bad defenses, go back to number 110, Vanderbilt, at least according to the Football Outsiders metric. Georgia averaged 8 yards a carry that day, ran up more than 300 yards on the ground. Number 81, Arkansas State, according to the Football Outsiders metrics, they were 8.1 yards per carry. Tech is number 92 in the Football Outsiders defensive efficiency rating right now. So I expect the Georgia running game to get a lot on the ground, pretty much anything that it wants, and I don't think the point spread's going to be a factor here either. I think Georgia wins this game by more than 28 points. So, Dari, kind of dangerous when it's this way, but thus far, clean sweep on the side of the Dogs here, minus the 28. You want to go with the flow?
I am not.
Okay.
I'm actually going to take Georgia Tech on the points. I mean, all the signs point to Georgia covering this game. They've covered 6 of their last 8 games between the two matchups, between the two teams, and they've also covered 10 of their last 11 played at Georgia Tech. Everything's pointing towards them. I just think I'm going to go opposite of everything I'm seeing. I think Georgia Tech's going to score just enough points to keep it under that 28.
All right, we'll follow that and see how it goes, and obviously we'll come back to Georgia and Georgia Tech for the total number of points we expect before we're done here on Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. The theme of the week will be rivalry games. We head to the Palmetto State next. Columbia, South Carolina will be the venue when South Carolina, whose season has for the most part tailspun since it beat Georgia a few weeks ago, gets a chance against its in-state rival, the Clemson Tigers. Tigers have been red hot as of late, both on the field and against the spread. They stand at number 3 right now in the college football playoff, top 25, looking ahead to the ACC championship game and then a whole lot more after that, trying to defend their national championship. They are 27-point road favorites. Mike Griffith, how is this one going to play out?
That's too many for me. Both of these teams have had a bye week. I think the South Carolina guys realize this is kind of it for them. Decent defense and talented quarterback is enough for me to think South Carolina covers the 27-point spread. Clemson 34, South Carolina 13.
So a lot of dogs lately for Mike Griffith. He takes one there. He takes the South Carolina Gamecocks to keep it closer than the experts think they're at home. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
I'd like the Gamecocks to make one last stand and cover that spread. I mean, they're going to – you give me those 27 points, I think South Carolina can stay with Clemson in that game. Even though they're beat up, I think this is a last stand there for South Carolina. Make it a 20, 24-point game.
Jeff on the side of Clemson minus the big number. Dog Nation Daily. Listeners and viewers weighing in on the favorite here or thinking the underdog has a chance. 60% do take Clemson, so almost a bit of a split decision, but ultimately Clemson rules with the audience. Connor Riley with a 2-1 edge for the Tigers here. I'll let you weigh in. Obviously, we love the idea of rivalry games, throwing the records out the window. Sometimes that is a little less true than sometimes we'd like to believe. Nothing better than to have this one be fun on TV. Do we get the entertainment value?
Well, Dabo did say the records will be thrown out for this game, so that has been confirmed.
Okay, good.
But I think Clemson wins and covers here. This Clemson team wants to prove that they are every bit as good as the other teams. South Carolina managed to cover against Alabama with some late last-second chicanery. Don't think I've forgotten about that. They covered and outright beat Georgia. I think Clemson knows they can send a message, at least to the gambling community, that, hey, some great team out there is able to win and cover against the Gamecocks because of that. give me Clemson here in the 27 points.
Well, I think you're right about Dabo Swinney's motivation, and he talks a lot voluntarily about the whole ACC versus SEC thing. So the idea of beating up on his in-state rival and sending a message there, I think to him there's some motivation, and I think just given how hot Clemson's been, that's certainly what they're going to try to do. However, I'm going to take South Carolina. Now, admittedly, part of me taking South Carolina here is the assumption that the two guys I'm competing with in our season-long contest, Connor and Dari, who we'll hear from in a moment, the fact they might take Clemson. So admittedly, this is a contrarian play just for the sake of our little competition here. However, let me see if I can give you a couple numbers that at least make taking South Carolina a decision worth justifying. First of all, Clemson on the road at Williams-Brice Stadium has only covered once in its last 6 trips to Willie B. So you can kind of do with that what you will. Maybe more important, though, Clemson, for the most part, in its run of just dominant wins, has been doing this against very, very susceptible defenses. I talked about the Football Outsiders defensive efficiency rankings and ratings a moment ago. Here are the defenses that Clemson's played thus far in conference play, and you got Syracuse, who's 82nd, North Carolina, who's 64th, Florida State 40th, Louisville 85th, Boston College 101st, NC State 96th, Wake Forest, one of the better ones, at 49th. Out of conference, they play Texas A&M, who's the number 25 defense right now, only won that game 24-10. South Carolina, on paper at least, is the best defense that Clemson's seen all season long. They're 21st in those Football Outsiders defensive efficiency ratings. So given the fact that Clemson hasn't always played great at Williams-Brice Stadium, given the fact that Will Muschamp actually quietly has been pretty good against the spread for his career with the Gamecocks, including a couple of instances that Connor cited from this year, and given the fact that on paper this is just a much more difficult defense than Clemson's dealt with all season long, I don't think the Gamecocks are good enough to win this game. I think 27 points is a lot of points, though. I can cover this one with a 24-point win, which really wouldn't be all that much of a sweat job, but would certainly send the South Carolina backers to the pay window. With that in mind, it's worth taking a flyer, especially given the fact I've got a chance to Riverside my competition. So give me the Gamecocks. However, the flow is on the side of Clemson. Dar, you want to go with the flow?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the flow and say Clemson. Trevor Lawrence has quietly been putting up really big numbers and being really efficient second half of the season. Clemson has scored at least 52 points in 4 straight games, and Trevor Lawrence has completed almost 80% of his passes. And Clemson has not allowed more than 20 points in any single game this year. I think Clemson gets the cover, and they roll, and they try to put up big points going into the playoffs.
So my plan thus far is working out perfectly, putting myself opposite both Dari and Connor, who are ahead of me in our current season-long standing. So I'll either be falling farther behind, or Dari and Connor will have to give up a game on me here with the way this one's going to play out on Saturday. It is our Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, where we talk about the consensus for the top games of the weekend against the spread. But when it comes to hot water flowing out of your shower from your water heater, or the heat flowing out of your vents, that's something that the folks at R.S. Andrews can make sure they take really good care of you on. You know, story after story, they've been delivering smiles. What that means is they show up on time, they do the work that's promised for the price is promised, especially like this time of year, holiday season where time is precious. The last thing you want to be doing is waiting all day for someone to kind of show up and do what they said they'd do. And the last thing you want, given the fact that we've all got to buy gifts, we've got to buy food to put on the table, to find out that issue that you thought you were dealing with, come to find out fixing that's more expensive than you expected to be. Those are unpleasant surprises here during this holiday season. And with R.S. Andrews, you get none of that. You get the peace of mind of knowing that they're going to do what they said they would do for the price, and they're going to show up on time to get it done. So check them out online at rsandrews.com. Maybe the most fun game to pick for the weekend, maybe the biggest game of the weekend, is the Iron Bowl, a traditional rivalry with a lot on the line, at least for Alabama, in terms of its chance to make a case for the college football playoff. The venue will be Jordan-Hare Stadium, where the Tide lost on the field the last time it played there back in 2017. However, they are a 3.5-point favorite in this game, with Mac Jones, obviously, as you know, at quarterback in place of the injured Tua Tagovailoa. How will this play out? Is Alabama on upset watch, or will they send a message to the committee? They truly are one of the 4 best teams in America. Mike Griffith, start us off.
I was feeling really good about Alabama, and then they played Western Carolina. I just don't think that was very good, not much reality against a terrible opponent like that. I think it bites Alabama. I think Auburn's going to win this game, and they're getting 3.5 points, but I'm going to take Auburn with the outright upset, 24-21 at Jordan-Hare Stadium.
So Mike Griffith going the way of the underdog there. He likes the Auburn Tigers. Interesting pick from him. Jeff Sintel, what do you think?
I like Auburn in that game, especially with the 3.5. So give me Auburn in those points.
He goes the side of the Auburn Tigers there as well. So a little bit of a, both riders now calling for the at least the point spread upset here. Very interesting. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, how are you going on this? Let's find out which side they're going to be on. 65% take Auburn. Man, this is a little bit of a surprise. Clean sweep in the direction of Auburn here for the moment. Connor, are you going to join the fray?
Of course not. I think there are too many people thinking, oh, Alabama is done, Alabama is toast. And part of the reason I'm doing this is because I think maybe this will be the week Dari picks against Alabama. No Tua Tagovailoa. Auburn seems like a smart pick here. But there's a reason Alabama is still favored in this game. And I would add that Jake Fromm played terrible Jake Fromm did not play all that well against Auburn. But DeAndre Swift still had over 100 yards. Joe Burrow had his worst game of the season to date against Auburn. Clyde Edwards-Helaire won them that game. I think Najee Harris is going to win them this game. I think this is going to be a Najee Harris legacy game. And because of that, give me the Tide. I know you're going to bring up the Alabama's a one-score favorite, Alabama on the road, yada, yada, yada. I like Alabama here, and I actually kind of like them because so many people are on the side of Auburn.
So the one thing I disagree with you on, though, is the idea that now I know we just played two videos, and then we heard from our audience on the side of Auburn. I don't think Auburn's a public play this weekend at all, Connor. I mean, I think that if we started polling the public at large, I think for the most part we're going to hear a lot of Alabama stuff on this. However, I am going to take Auburn there as well, and the number that I cite that Connor brings up, this obviously comes from our buddy the Bear, Chris Felica from ESPN. In the last 7 instances when Alabama was favored by 7 points, or I should say by less than 7, so the last 7 instances when the Tide favored by less than 7, they're just 3-4 straight up in those games. I mean, they've lost 4 times in an instance. They've covered only once. We're essentially asking Mac Jones in this game to do something that Tua Tagovailoa typically didn't do when he was healthy and playing quarterback for the Tide. It's play really well against a really good defense, and Auburn unquestionably is a good defense. To me, this game kind of screams Auburn for all the reasons that I've mentioned. Plus, let me give you one more thing here. Here are the Alabama-Auburn results in the Gus Malzahn era. In 2013, number 4 Auburn against number 1 Alabama. That's a 34-28 Auburn win. 2014, number 2 Alabama against number 15 Auburn. That's a 55-44 Auburn win. Number 2 Alabama unranked Auburn in 2015. Number 1 Alabama, number 16 Auburn in 2012. 2017, number 6 Auburn against number 1 Alabama. That's also an Auburn win. What you see for the most part is Auburn winning, sometimes covering, in these instances when it's been kind of a good ranked team. For the most part, when Alabama has beaten up on Auburn during the Gus Malzahn era, it's one of those down years where Auburn finds itself not ranked in the top 25 by the time that game is played. When Auburn has had the horses to compete with Alabama, Malzahn, for the most part, has had the strategy that has enabled that, including winning on the field straight up twice since 2013, including the most recent trip to Auburn way back in 2017. That matters to me here. Nick Saban has not necessarily outcoached Gus Malzahn in their head-to-head meetings in the past. I think Auburn is definitely worth the flyer. I actually like being against Connor on this one because I do think it's another chance to maybe step up in the standings. But I think the case for Auburn makes itself here. I'm going to take the Auburn Tigers, and by a pretty wide margin right now, the flow is on the side of Auburn. Dari, no Tua Tagovailoa. Do you want to go with the flow?
I do not. I'm going to stick with my rule. I'm taking Bama. However, I would stay away from betting on this game on the day because I do see and kind of like how Auburn could win this game. But I'm sticking with Bama, and I'm going to roll with them.
All right, it's very, very interesting. Now, for those of you who are maybe not regular viewers to our program, we've had some fun this year with Dari Payro's opinion that his number 1 gambling rule is he always takes Alabama. And what Dari has said about this is that over the course of the season, that's going to be a profitable choice, just given how dominant Alabama can be. And we've seen that, obviously, including the most recent game 2 weeks ago against Mississippi State. When you kind of lane with Alabama for the full season, they're going to be profitable over the course of the long haul. Is it the absence of Tua Tagovailoa that caused you to at least question that decision here right now, or is it just the strength of Auburn's defense playing at home?
No. I think it has nothing to do with, Alabama, because that's like next man up, and they're so deep and so talented. It's just, Auburn at home is really good, and their defense is playing really well. They've had some close calls and close games. I just think that they may be due, for a game. And then, it's just the rivalry game. You get a lot of crazy things that can happen in emotional type games like this, especially when both teams have a lot of talent and are playing well. That's why it's particularly a game I would personally stay away from.
Sure.
From putting any kind of money on.
Well, let's move on and talk about Tennessee hosting Vanderbilt. The Vols got its 6th win a week ago. That means they are now bowl eligible. With a win on Saturday, they would also exceed their predicted Vegas season win total from the beginning of the season, set at 6.5. This would be number 7 for Tennessee. They play as a 22-point favorite, and it has been kind of a while since Tennessee has beaten Vanderbilt, to be completely honest with you. So there's some interesting intrigue there for that one. Mike Griffith, how about Vols indoors? What do you expect to happen here?
Tennessee's got a lot of momentum right now. There's just not much left in the tank for Vanderbilt. Expect this game to be close early, but ultimately Tennessee covers that 22-point spread just barely, 45-21 in Neyland Stadium. Philip Fulmer's back in charge. He never lost it at Vanderbilt, worth noting.
So he takes Tennessee there to cover the spread in the rivalry game. Jeff Sintel, what about you? What do you think?
Tennessee in a big way. You got Jawan Jennings playing like the grown man receiver of the SEC. You got Trey Smith playing the best football of his career at left guard. On the down low, Jeremy Pruitt is getting some second place consideration for SEC Coach of the Year. I like Tennessee in spite of that number.
So a one-way street for the Vols, at least up to this point in time. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, 58% take Tennessee, so a little bit of backing there from the audience when it comes to Vanderbilt, but the overall consensus on the side of Tennessee. Connor, this is one of those games that kind of makes me nervous how difficult it is to make a case for anything other than Tennessee winning and covering the rivalry game. Can you make any kind of argument for Vanderbilt whatsoever?
Tennessee is probably a little emotional coming off that big win against Missouri last week. And Vanderbilt, Derek Mason can get his team up to play for games.
Yeah.
I think my head is telling me to pick Tennessee. My head told me to pick Tennessee last week, and I didn't listen to it. Instead, I listened to you and let you talk me into Missouri. And I got to stop listening to you on your picks because, boy, do they stink.
No, come on now. We're on quite a streak here lately.
One winning week in a row.
Stop.
I'm going to go with Tennessee here.
Yeah.
I don't have a good reason why. My buddy P Money is actually putting money on this game, and he's taking Vanderbilt. He just thinks 3 touchdowns is too much. But I think this Tennessee team is motivated. They've lost 3 straight times to Vanderbilt. These seniors, Juwan Jennings, they want to go out with a win against these guys. I think I taking Tennessee. I'm going with my head here.
I thought there was a justifiable reason to back Vanderbilt in the Kentucky game a couple of weeks ago. I thought the numbers actually called for that, and Vandy just didn't really show up at all beyond the sort of beginning stretch of the game. So I'm kind of done with Vanderbilt now. I think that there's actually kind of a dispiriting impact on the program by the fact that it's been announced that Derek Mason's coming back. It seems like they're not responding to that too well in Nashville right now. The only legitimate argument I can make against Tennessee here, and as I said before, I'm naturally attracted to the contrarian side. I think it's hard to make the contrarian play against Tennessee. The only argument against Tennessee is, did you know that as a 22-point favorite here, the Vols haven't won an SEC game by 22 points or more since September of 2016. So it's been a long time since Tennessee has won an SEC game as comfortably as the gambling community is calling for it to win this game against Vanderbilt. But Tennessee's also red hot right now, covering in 6 straight games. I thought the win last week at Missouri was a statement because there were a lot of reasons for Tennessee to kind of slow down momentum last week in Columbia, Missouri. Barry Odom, the embattled coach of the Tigers, needed that game. But Tennessee went on the road, got that win, and really having been red hot, really as of late. So I'm going to join the throng on this. I'm going to take Tennessee minus the 22 points. And with that in mind, Dari, as a clean sweep here, do you want to go with the flow and take the Vols?
Yep, clean sweep. I'm going to take the Vols, go with the flow. I've been pretty good with Tennessee all year, picking their games. I told you several weeks ago that they were going to make a bowl. The home team has actually dominated against the spread between these two teams for probably like the past 8 years.
Good number.
I like that to continue this week. Tennessee's, they've just been getting better each and every week, and their defense is too much for Vandy. Vandy's mailed it in. And Tennessee didn't have those stumbles early on in the year against Georgia State and BYU, which was a close game. They potentially be 8-3 or 9-3.
Yeah, no, I think that's
That'd be worry for Prude in his first year there. So I think he's got it moving in the right direction, and I think they're going to easily cover this 22.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Dari. I think that's well said and good insight on that all the way around. It's Go With the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews for all your air, heating, plumbing, and electric needs here this holiday season and throughout the winter to come. Make sure you check out R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. Next game, as we keep it rolling, another rivalry game from within the SEC, at least involving an SEC team. Florida hosting Florida State, the Sunshine State Showdown, or what is this one called? I don't even know. Does this one have a nickname? I'm not even quite sure about that. Obviously, Florida State has fallen on hard times, and Florida, to its credit, has rebounded well from the loss it suffered to Georgia, which ended any chances of winning the SEC East. Gators, for the most part, trying to put back-to-back solid seasons together under Coach Dan Mullen. They play in the Swamp as a 17.5-point favorite. Mike Griffith, your thoughts on the Seminoles and the Gators?
Florida State seems like they've found something to me. I don't think they're going to win this game, but I think they're going to cover the spread. Florida 24, Florida State 17. Surprise.
So he goes Florida State there to cover the number against Florida. Interesting for Mike, who's become kind of an underdog picking machine here over the last few weeks. Jeff Sintel, what about you?
What is it? Willie Taggart did not sign his contract in this one. I think a lot of happy Gator fans are going to be happy with the outcome. I like Florida in a big way in spite of those points.
So Florida is the pick there from Jeff Sintel. Split decision from our two scribes, Dog Nation Daily. Listeners and viewers, they don't like the Gators, obviously, but Florida State is terrible. But, hey, by a thin margin, they do take FSU to cover, maybe picking with their heart more so than their heads, and I certainly understand where that comes from. Connor, this was a once great rivalry. It is not anymore. You have thoughts on Gators and Knowles?
I do. Do you know how many wins Florida has at the Swamp this decade against Florida State?
Haven't won there since 2009.
That would be 0.
Yeah.
I think Florida does it, and I think they do it in a big way. I think they want to continue to roll up points. And an important thing to look out for, Florida might want to try and get into that Cotton Bowl, New Year's Six Bowl, instead of having to go to the Citrus Bowl in Orlando, get to go to Dallas. They kind of need to win this game because they're currently behind Penn State, and we probably need to leapfrog them to get into that game. So maybe look for them to put some style points on the board, and because of that, give me Florida here.
Yeah, I've been obviously negative on Florida a little bit. I don't like the Gators. I've never pretended anything other than that. But you got to give them credit for winning and covering against Vanderbilt after the Georgia game, winning and covering against Missouri after the Georgia game. Connor's point about the long streak here in Gainesville. Last Gators win there, Tim Tebow was the quarterback, believe it or not. Last year, Florida broke a long streak of just overall losses to Florida State, which was kind of inexplicable in its own right. And this year, I think they look to break this streak of not having won the game in the Swamp. From that standpoint, I think that Dan Mullen's motivated. Connor's point about the bowl situation, I think, is a pretty astute point to bring up. But just the idea of kind of putting a pelt on the wall in a year in which Florida, for the most part, is not going to have a trophy to show for its efforts here this season. Really beating up on Florida State. I think there's some motivation to do that here. I don't think 17.5 is too big of an ask for Florida here in this spot. So it's another example of I have a really hard time making any kind of case for the contrarian pick. I just don't think Florida State's really good at the moment, nor do I think there's any kind of leadership in that program to help play a game like this. I think that Florida can pick its margin of victory here, and my guess is they'll pick a pretty high and heavy total. So I'll take Florida over Florida State minus the 17.5, and another example on Rivalry Saturday of everybody being on one side. Dari, Griff took the he took the underdog there. So who did? Oh, that's right. Yeah. So I'm sorry. That is exactly right. The audience took the underdog, and Griff did there as well. So I'm not giving enough credit here for the underdog, but nonetheless, the flow is still on the side of Florida. So do you want to go with the flow?
I'm going with the flow. I'm going to take the Gators. I actually love Florida to get another dominating win this week. Florida State's offensive line is atrocious. They're giving up a ton of sacks. Now comes Florida, who dominates getting in the backfield. They're going to live in that backfield all game. It's going to be a long day for the Seminoles. However, next year they should be getting a good coach, so hopefully the rivalry will start to pick back up.
Yeah, I think sometimes it is that simple, Dari, and I think that's pretty good analysis. And I'm like you, as a fan of college football, you certainly hope that one day Florida State means something again, just given how just miserable the state of the program for the Seminoles in Tallahassee has been. All right, we'll come back to the SEC before we're done with more thoughts on Georgia and Georgia Tech. Let's step outside the conference here for a moment and talk about games with major postseason implications, in some cases major rivalry games, including a ranked versus ranked game coming out of the American Athletic Conference. These two teams, Cincinnati and Memphis, vying to be the highest-rated Group of 5 team and work their way into a New Year's Six bowl. The Liberty Bowl, the site of this game, been the site of a couple big games thus far this year, and the Tigers stand right now as an 11-point favorite. Bearcats versus Tigers. Mike Griffith, what do you think?
This playing Cincinnati. Memphis needs to win this game to get into the AAC Conference Championship. Cincinnati's already clinched it. I think Cincinnati's a pretty good team, but the game's at Memphis. Tigers favored by 11. I got Cincinnati covering, though. Memphis 30, Cincinnati 27.
So it is Bearcats for Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, what about you?
You know what the stats say about those AAC games, especially for those home dogs? I like Memphis. I like what they're doing there in that program. Shout out Coach Norville. I like them to cover that spread.
So it is the Memphis Tigers as the pick for Jeff Sintel. So once again, a split decision between our two scribes. Dog Nation Daily, listeners and viewers, where are you on when it comes to Memphis and Cincinnati? Let's see the pick there for them. 62% do take Memphis over Cincinnati, so split decision favors the homestanding and favorite Tigers here at the moment. Connor Riley, what about you in a pretty fun battle here in the American Athletic Conference? Two teams that may play again coming up in the American Athletic Conference Championship game there as well. That's probably worth paying attention to.
Yeah, so if Memphis wins this game, these two will meet in the AAC title game. 11 points is a lot, and I do actually think Memphis is the better team. Oh, hold on, and has a good chance of winning here. But, one, I feel like I'm obligated to pick Cincinnati here after Green Soldier, one of our devoted YouTube followers, pointed out maybe Cincinnati isn't as quite good as the record indicates. But furthermore, I kind of think Cincinnati needs to have at least a good showing in this game to possibly stay in the conversation to be the top Group of 5 team and get that ticket punch to the Cotton Bowl. Because if they lose this game, and if they lose this game by 11 points, they're probably not, even if they do win next week and beat Memphis next week, they're probably not going to be able to leapfrog, say, a Boise State who's at 20, or this Memphis team that is at number 18 right now and is the highest-ranked Group of 5 team. And having said all that, Missouri is a defensive team. They want to, shorten the game up, and I do think in an underdog situation that sort of plays into their favor. Give me the Bearcats here with the 11 points.
So I'm going to take Memphis. Part of this is based on the fact that Cincinnati has just not been a very good team as of late. They're only 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 games. And when you look at Memphis, I think this is a team that's really proven itself this year. They've won 2 really different kinds of games, for instance. A 15-10 low-scoring defensive game against Ole Miss, and that win actually looks way better now than it probably seemed like it would at the beginning of the season. High-scoring game against a good SMU team, which is a solid ranked team right now on the base of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. They won that game 54-48. So they've kind of done the low-scoring defensive game, the high-scoring offensive game. In between that, win against Navy, which is a pretty good win, 35-23. On the road at a place like Temple, no problem there, 30-28 is a final score. So they've kind of been all over the place, handling business, lots of different kinds of games, better schedule than you might think. Most recent game, 49-10 road win at South Florida. I think Memphis is actually a really solid team right now, and 11 is not too much to ask from them in the Liberty Bowl, where the Tigers typically play pretty well. Norvell, one of the best coaches in college football. Cincinnati just kind of scuffling along a bit as of late. To me, this feels like a pretty easy pick, even though it's a double-digit number. I'm going to go with Memphis, and that puts the flow on the side of Memphis, I believe. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Tigers?
I'm going to go with the flow and taking Memphis. I actually love them. Both these teams are trying to play to get in the Cotton Bowl. They're trying to win the AAC championship. Memphis is going to win this game, and they're going to play next week. Cincinnati has a good defense, but their offense has struggled over the past month, and they've had 4 wins by 3 points or less. So Cincinnati comes limping into this game, while the Tigers are surging. They have a lot of momentum. They're rolling. They've scored 42 more points in every game since the Temple game. Cincinnati has played one good team, and that was Ohio State earlier this year, and they got blanketed. I think Memphis is going to pour it on them. I love them. They're going to cover that 11.
And is there a chance that a Memphis win against Cincinnati would open the door for Navy to make the American Athletic Conference Championship game, I believe?
No. Cincinnati's already clinched the spot.
Okay. For some reason, I thought that Navy was somehow alive in this thing some way or another.
No, they will have a rematch next week.
Yeah, so there you
This
go.
is part one. Part two comes next week.
So
If Memphis were to lose, I believe, and SMU were to win, SMU would play Cincinnati next week.
okay, so there you go. So I guess maybe Navy's not still alive in this thing. Either way, I kind of like Memphis by a pretty wide margin here, so we'll see how that plays out. Next game, maybe one of the most fun games of the season for an Ohio State team that's ranked number 1 right now in the college football playoff top 25, but facing what I believe is the most significant test of the season on the road against a Michigan team that's getting hot at the right time, shaking off the doldrums of not playing well against Wisconsin earlier in the year, getting the relatively easy road win last week at Indiana, looking pretty good right now and sitting at home as 9-point underdogs are Jim Harbaugh's Wolverines against Ohio State, who can add another resume-boosting win here against a highly ranked team in the Wolverines. One of the great rivalries in all of college football. I don't care what part of the country you live in. There's always intrigue and interest when it comes to Ohio State and Michigan, and this year is no different. With that in mind, Mike Griffith, start us off.
If you would ask me about this game 3 weeks ago, I would have told you it wasn't going to be close, but Ohio State got a little dose of reality against Penn State. I think Michigan playing better than Penn State. Michigan's going to take this game in the fourth quarter before they lose, 24-22, but they will cover the 9-point spread against Justin Fields and company.
So it is Michigan covering, Mike Griffith says. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
Deadly game right here. This is the one everybody's pointing to in the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, the one that's going to give Buckeyes a little bit of pause. Chase Young's on the field, though, with this one. I do like Michigan to cover that spread and what feels like a 13 to 17-point game, which is closer than most opponents have played the Buckeyes this year.
So it is Ohio State that he takes there with that one, so split decision thus far on that. How about Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers? Buckeyes, Wolverines, 66% like the idea of a Michigan cover here, which would certainly be fun on a noon game. Opposite the Dogs, who'll be playing against Georgia Tech. Certainly lots of eyes on that game, the big noon Saturday game on Fox, while Georgia is playing against the Yellow Jackets there on ABC. Connor, I don't have a strong feeling on this game. Do you have a strong feel on this really, really fun rivalry?
I wouldn't call this a rivalry, and it hasn't been all that fun because Michigan's gotten its brains beat in just about every time these two teams have played as of late. You know, I've been hot on Michigan, and I've been right on Michigan a lot. And it pains me to say this, but I'm taking the Buckeyes here. As good as this Michigan team is, I think part of this is mental. Part of this is Ohio State knows that they probably should have covered last week. They were up 21-0 in that game and let Penn State get back into it when they probably shouldn't have. I think Ohio State wants to send another message here saying we are far and away the best team in college football, and I think beating a pretty good Michigan team in Michigan would do that. And this is, from an intensity standpoint, I think maybe the second most intense rivalry in all of college football. Ohio State's going to want to rub it in, and we'll have no second thoughts about scoring a lot more points.
So this is obviously a series in which Michigan's had its problems, but sometimes as a favorite, according to OddsShark, hasn't always been as easy as it was supposed to be for Ohio State. Just 1-4 in their last 5 as a favorite versus Michigan, according to the database there at OddsShark. You know, if I could pick a game to sort of take a pass on, Ohio State and Michigan's probably the one that I would, because I just simply believe that it's not supposed to be easy for a team over the course of an entire season. Now, Ohio State didn't cover last week against Penn State. Was that the trip up? Was that the non-easy win, or was it the harbinger for what's going to happen here against the Wolverines? Admittedly, I'm on a flyer on this one, but I think it's fun to be on the side of the underdog, especially playing at home, especially given what this would potentially mean for both Jim Harbaugh's future and Ohio State's present in terms of being the number 1 team in the college football playoff. I'm going to take a flyer here in the Wolverines. Don't have a lot of reasons for doing that, other than the fact that I do believe in Don Brown's defense. I do think they can make things challenging on Ohio State here. And, you know, 9 puts you underneath a lot of key numbers, 7 and 3 and even 1. I mean, there are a lot of Ohio State wins that could send Michigan backers to the pay window. So I'm going to take the flyer. I'm going to take the Wolverines. Now, the flow is on the side then of Michigan. So, Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Wolverines?
I'm going to go with the flow. We'll take the home dog, Michigan, plus the 9 points. This is the best Buckeye team Harbaugh has ever faced. There's so much NFL talent on both sides of the ball for Ohio State. Michigan's defense is going to be ready to go in this game. The second half of the season, they've been lights out, even better than Ohio State's defense has been. But this game is going to come down to Shea Patterson and his ability to avoid turnovers, avoid sacks, and take care of the ball and have a really good day passing. If he can do that, I think he keeps the game close. If they can get the game close in the fourth quarter, anything can happen. I think it's going to be a really good game. I'm hoping for an instant classic. I would love to see an upset here. It would really get the rivalry renewed and going and have some teeth because, like Connor said, it's kind of been a one-way street. At the beginning of the year, I thought Ohio State would easily come in here and win this game. Right now, I like Michigan in this situation. I think they have a lot to play for, and they're peaking at the right time. I think they're going to give Ohio State some trouble.
All right, good stuff there from Dari Pero. Let's keep it going here with another game in the Big Ten. This one will decide the Big Ten West as the Badgers of Wisconsin head to Minneapolis to take the Minnesota Golden Gophers as Coach P.J. Fleck tries to row the boat all the way to the Big Ten title game. The Gophers, though, are a 2-point underdog at home. Mike Griffith, let us know your thoughts.
Love the story. Love P.J. Fleck. Love the Gophers story. Just think Wisconsin's run game is too much. I got Wisconsin 34, Minnesota 24. Badgers cover the 2-point spread.
So Mike's got the Badgers on the road. Jeff Sintel, what about you?
I like Wisconsin to win this football game, laying those points.
So clean sweep thus far for the Scribes on the side of Wisconsin. They are both there. How about Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers in the battle for Paul Bunyan's axe? Which side are they leaning on here? Let's find out from our audience. 57% take the favorite on the road. They take Wisconsin. Connor, are you going to back whiskey as well?
No. I'm going to take the home dogs here. I do think there's a real chance where Michigan does win and cover, or at least cover that 9 points. I think if I were to actually wager on these games, I do like both the home dogs here. Wisconsin, they've sort of gone away from the public eye, after getting drugged by Ohio State, but there's just something about this team that I can't really trust. I don't think their offense is all that great outside of Jonathan Taylor. And when these two teams met last year in Wisconsin, Minnesota blew the doors off of them. Yeah. I think this Minnesota team is very confident. They know what they are. They know what they do well. Tanner Morgan, they got two great wide receivers on the outside. And this is a rare spot for them. I think they live up to it. Give me the Gophers here to win outright.
Yeah, I do. I think Wisconsin's probably the better team, but admittedly, I'm maybe late to the party on P.J. Fleck being a better coach than I give him credit for. For the most part, I don't like rah-rah coaches. I think that kind of stuff, bright flames, burn out quick. I think the Fleck flame can kind of burn out quickly. But, Chris Fleck had this number. P.J. Fleck, in his last 7 instances as an underdog, has won 6 of those 7 outright. The only loss was by 4 at Iowa as a 3.5-point underdog. So this is a guy that's performing pretty well in comparison to expectations, and maybe there just is a little bit of magic in that Golden Gopher formula for right now. I'm at least going to take the flyer on that. I will take the Golden Gophers here, and that puts the flow on the side of Minnesota, I believe. Dar, you want to go with the flow?
I do. I'm taking Minnesota plus the 2. What's interesting in this is going to be the weather. The forecasts are calling for 50% chance of snow.
Wow. With
3 inches of snow falling during daytime from the kickoff.
Oh, that's fun.
So if that's the case, it's going to make it really hard to throw. It's going to slow down Minnesota's offense, and advantage goes to Wisconsin with their running game.
I think
I think it's going to be a close game, regardless, and I'm hoping for the weather to be good enough not to affect the passing game that much. So I like the Minnesota, and I really would like to see Minnesota versus Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, since we've already seen Wisconsin and them. I'd like to see something different to see if they can, with their passing attack, provide any additional challenges to Ohio State.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that, Dari. I think that's part of my thought process on that, too. Maybe a little bit of a rooting interest in favor of Minnesota here. Rivalry game from the Big 12, known as Bedlam. Oklahoma going to Stillwater to take on the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They are 12.5-point favorites on the road, are the Sooners. So, Mike Griffith, your thoughts on Bedlam?
Oklahoma is a 12.5-point favorite over Oklahoma State. I know Oklahoma State's playing good football right now. Not good enough. I got Oklahoma 45, Oklahoma State 30. They cover a 12.5-point spread.
So he likes the Sooners on the road. Does Mike Griffith? Jeff Sintel, how about you?
Oklahoma, up and down team. Definitely an up and down season for Lincoln Riley and that bunch. I like Oklahoma to cover that spread against Oklahoma State.
Sooners as well for Jeff Sintel. Dog Nation Daily, listeners and viewers. In this battle between Mike Gundy and Lincoln Riley, 55% do take Oklahoma State, so a case to be made for the underdog at home. Connor, this is a fun rivalry. What are your thoughts here?
Best rivalry name in all of sports,
Yeah,
Bedlam. I think it's classic. I'm going to make a case here for the Cowboys. Now, I don't love that our writers, and I am also a writer myself, I don't love that I actually do love that Griffin and Teller on the side of Oklahoma.
Right.
Here. Oklahoma State, yes, they're without their starting quarterback, but they also have the most prolific running back in the country in Chuba Hubbard. And I think when you want to sort of slow the game down, decrease the possessions, I think you lean on your running game. I think Oklahoma State is going to try to do that. And if there's one other point I might add, this Oklahoma team, yeah, sure, they're moving up in the rankings, but I'm not really sure why. They've played 3 straight one-score games. Yeah. That is not necessarily indicative of how good this Oklahoma team should be.
Right.
And if, as always, I feel obliged to say I love a home dog. 12.5 is more than plenty for me on my plate. Give me the Cowboys here to at least keep it within that.
Yeah, to back up what Connor said, first time since 2000 a top 10 team has played 3 consecutive games, winning by 4 or fewer points, and that's kind of been the story with Oklahoma, just kind of eking by in these top 10 games. That's enough for me to take Oklahoma State. The fact is, I'm just really suspicious of Oklahoma. I don't have a strong feeling about Oklahoma State one way or another, but just suspicious enough of Oklahoma that I can have the home team and about 2 touchdowns worth of point spread. I'm going to take that every single day of the week. So give me the Cowboys there as well. That puts the flow on the side of the Pokes. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Oklahoma State?
Going with the flow, I'm going to take Oklahoma State plus the 12.5 points. The Sooners have had 3 straight close games. Iowa State, Baylor, and TCU winning by a combined 8 points. The reason? Because they've been turning the ball over a lot. I think that continues in this game. Oklahoma State's going to win the turnover battle. A few other stats just to keep in mind. The Sooners are 0-4 against the spread in their last 4 road games. And the Cowboys are 7-1 against the spread in their last 8 home games.
Great numbers.
Give me the home dog. I like the Cowboys here.
Great numbers from Dari Payer. That's why I always love his picks, because he backs them up with a lot of evidence. Let's go with the flow presented by R.S. Andrews. Let us get back to the SEC for one more, then we'll finish up with Georgia Tech on the point total on that. A clerical error prevented us from doing this one a little earlier. This is on me for how I recorded the games this week. But Texas A&M going to LSU. Bad blood for both these teams after the 74-72 Aggies win in College Station a year ago. Long overtime game that involved a little bit of fisticuffs after the game with staffers from both teams and a relative of Jimbo Fisher. That puts a little bit of extra, I think, emphasis on this game, really probably for both sides. Certainly we've heard that from LSU here this week. Tigers, also the number 2 team in the rankings this week, 17-point favorites here over A&M. Mike Griffith, your thoughts?
Really liked what I saw from Jimbo Fisher's team. I think they're playing really well. They've won, 4 out of their last 5 games. Georgia knocked them off. But I think this game is going to be closer than people think. LSU's a 17-point favorite. But I've got the Tigers winning this game 28-24.
So it is Aggies for Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
Interesting game here. Is this a look-ahead game there for the Tigers and Coach O with Jimbo Fisher? I think the Aggies are going to give them a game. I think I'm going to take Texas A&M in that game with those points.
Jeff goes with Jimbo there, too, at least to cover the spread. Dog Nation Daily, listeners and viewers, they just saw Texas A&M, and yet they've seen enough to know they like LSU by a 2-1 margin. They take LSU over the Texas A&M Aggies. Flo, though, right now sitting with the Aggies here for a moment. Connor, you see any case to be made for the upset, or at least a point spread upset?
I do. Or not for the upset. I see for LSU.
Yeah.
What did you see from Texas A&M last week that actually impressed you?
Yeah, not a ton.
I just go back to, yes, Georgia failed to cover in that game, but I think that was more just because of inaccuracy and missing on the little things on the offensive side of the ball. If Jake Fromm connects with George Pickens, that's a touchdown. It's a 13-point game. They turn one of those field goals into a touchdown. Georgia covers in that game. If they recover the onside kick in that game, it was a lot of missed opportunities on Georgia's own petard. So having said all that, LSU wants to win this game. They kind of got jobbed last year losing this game the way they did in 7 overtimes.
Yeah.
And because of all that, and because of I think Ed Orgeron generally despises Jimbo Fisher, just given that how much LSU and the old administration wanted him as their head coach. I think this is a game that is very personal to Edo. And I think this team is going to be a little agitated that they are now no longer the number 1 team in the country. Having said all that, give me the Tigers. Go Tigers.
Yeah, it's really kind of amazing. If you don't live with it every day, you don't necessarily know this. But up until last year, LSU has totally dominated Texas A&M. The win for the Aggies a year ago, only the first time in the last 8, which obviously dates back to A&M coming to the SEC, that Texas A&M won on the field against LSU. They are 0-8 against the spread in the career of A&M as an SEC team playing against the Tigers. I'm totally with Connor and the motivation thing. We've kind of chronicled that a lot this week on Dog Nation Daily, that LSU really feels like it has a lot to play for on Saturday. That's a dangerous thing. Orgeron's been really good against the spread. 17 points, not too much for him. The other thing is, I'm a little bit of a believer that Jimbo Fisher's been really good at A&M, even though the record says otherwise. They're obviously handling their business against lesser competition. The ranked teams they're playing, and at A&M you play a lot of those, they're just not doing much against those teams. And so I think the case here is on LSU. I don't see an argument for the underdog really at all. So give me LSU there as well. And that is going to put the flow on the side of LSU. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Tigers?
I do. I'm going to go with the flow and take LSU to cover the 17. For a lot of the same reasons Connor was talking about. I think they're going to have a chip on their shoulder coming into this game, trying to make a point, especially the playoff committee after they dropped us from number 1 to number 2. Especially how the game went down last year, and for everything else, I think they're really going to be focused on this game to put up some points.
All right, so that is the story with games involving rivalries and playoff implications on college football. But as we always do here on Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. And by the way, R.S. Andrews is your source for air, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Let's face it, this time of year, a lot of you are thinking about that heating system. Want to make sure it stays safe for the winter to come. The $99 Mega Safety Check is a great way to do that. More information on that at rsandrews.com. But also don't forget, when you got folks staying over your house this holiday season, the last thing you want is to ask them to take a cold shower. I mean, water heaters go out, and R.S. Andrews, in many cases, can replace that water heater for you same-day situation. So rsandrews.com, if you're dealing with a crisis here this holiday season, they will take good care of you and get your house all back ready to go. Factory fresh specs for everything, all those major systems. They'll do it for you. Find them out more at rsandrews.com. All right, the total for Georgia is 46 for the Dogs and the Yellow Jackets on Saturday. Over, under. Mike Griffith, what do you think?
Dial it back on Georgia Tech, over under of 46. I'm going to take the over.
So over for Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
46, I like Bulldogs and Jackets to go over in this one on the flats.
Over for Jeff Sintel there as well. We are flying over here for right now. Dog Nation Daily, listeners and viewers, I think they've taken the over all season long. They've taken the over again. Let's find out. 84% take the over of 46. Man, this is quite a everybody's in a good holiday spirit here for right now. Connor, is there a case to be made for the over?
Yeah, Georgia Tech's defense is awful. They're 82nd, I believe, in scoring defense in the country. And I think this Georgia team probably wants to try and get itself right against Georgia Tech, knowing that it has LSU next week, at least put some things together and getting some continuity on offense. I believe they've only gone over once all season with the point spread against Power 5 teams. That was against Tennessee in a game where there was a defensive touchdown.
That's right.
But I think this Georgia team is due. I think they finagle a way to get to 46 points, 47 points at that. And one correction from earlier, regarding Navy and Memphis. If Memphis loses and Navy beats Houston this weekend, Navy does in fact go to the AAC title game against Cincinnati.
All right, so there you go. So still a chance for the troops to get themselves in there. I still like Memphis in the game, but it's kind of fun to think about a scenario for the Naval Academy there as well. So you're going over for this one, Connor. Wow, we are clean sweep on the over thus far. I like Georgia minus the points, but I don't think you need 46 to cover 28 against Georgia Tech because of how bad I think the Jackets are right now. As Connor mentioned, only one Power 5 game all year long for Georgia has gone over the total. 6 straight games have gone under. I don't see any reason why this would be any different on that. Obviously, Vegas sees the weakness of Tech. That's why the number's a little higher than it has been as of late. But give me under again until I'm wrong on this. I'll be the one contrarian that takes the under here. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the over?
I'm going to go with the flow. I'm going to take the over. I think it just gets over that 46. Under is probably a good play, too, just because Georgia has been under for most of the year. But I think it just gets over that 46.
All right, so that's a fun thing to think about here as we head towards clean old-fashioned hate and the rest of the rivalry slate here this college football season. Dari, thanks so much for your picks and your insight. We do wish you well and hope you enjoy the Thanksgiving week as we are now recording this prior to Thanksgiving Day. It'll obviously air on Friday. Hope you enjoy that, all the football that takes place here this weekend. Hope your picks do well, and we'll look forward to speaking to you here on Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews again next week at the same time.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. Happy Thanksgiving to you and the Dog Nation listeners out there. Go Dogs and run the table.
That's what I like to hear from Dari Payro's way to close it out. He's done that now several weeks in a row, and Georgia has made good on that promise, indeed running the table. And by the way, when you hear us talk about point spreads and picks and things like that, don't forget the point spread data that we use here in the program is courtesy of our friends at MyBookie. When you sign up for MyBookie, develop an account with them, they're going to give a big thank you to you, a big first deposit sign-up bonus up to $1,000. They can double your first deposit, so they're going to put more money in your account before you even win your first bet. It's one of the things that MyBookie's famous for, as well as the best player perks in the industry, the fast, no-hassle payout when you win. So here's my advice to you. Find MyBookie online. Type MyBookie into your browser, then use the promo code DogNation. And when you use that, you'll get that big first deposit bonus. Special thank you, of course, from our friends at MyBookie for doing that. Then after that, you play, you win, you get paid. So quick recap. Find MyBookie online. Type it into your browser. The internet will do the work for you. Use the promo code DogNation. Get a big first deposit bonus, up to $1,000 first deposit doubled, and then win some games, make some picks, make some money off your expertise. And certainly we wish you the best of luck with your own picks here this weekend there as well. Thanks for being here on Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We'll look forward to speaking to all of you again next week at the same time.